sit behind the wheel of a racing car, setting new records of speed at famous international speedways. Share the thrill, excitement, and danger as men of iron gambled their lives on split-second decisions. On four-wheels, on two-wheels, these are the great moments of sport with the best drivers of all time. And you are riding with them.
From 1953 to 1961, Nat Zucker and I created almost 100 auto racing films. These films documented the great races of all time at Darlington, Daytona, and of course Indianapolis. We'll look at some of these films and see how they came into being. It's a hell of a story, and I'm glad to be able to tell it to you. I'm Les Becker, and these are the classic films of auto racing.
As racing cars prepare once more to smash records. Many worldly stopwatches show Goldsmith is gaining 1.5 seconds each lap.
It's a scorcher at Indianapolis, and it's going to be a lot hotter before they've run the 37th 500-mile Memorial Day race around this 2.5.
This was 1953 at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. It was one of the first racing films I ever made. And I had gotten my start in filmmaking 1951 when I graduated Columbia University and took a few courses at CCNY with Carl Lerner, who was a brilliant editor and an excellent teacher. Shortly thereafter, I got a job with Walter Klee Associates. Klee was an editing service, and we edited everything from 30-second commercials to 1-hour documentaries. Happily, the opportunity was there for me to learn editing in a very significant way. After the Walter Klee job, I went on to Dynamic Films, which was a production company. And there I did a number of shoots before I got to Indianapolis in 1953. And that's how a very long career in auto racing began.
Let me sing you a song. From June to April, wait until the day when new men come to join their ranks and roar down the straightaway. When drivers and mechanics stake their lives and skill against the clock and the hand of death in a battle that's going still.
Now, the most famous of all the racetracks, of course, is the Indianapolis 500. It is a major site, perhaps the major site, in the annual circuit of auto racing. It started racing in 1911. There was film around of little old cars running rather quickly for that time around the racetrack that was almost just built. They laid something like 5 million bricks on that racetrack before it was completed, and they did it in a record time in order to meet a deadline for a certain race. The Indianapolis 500 in 1953 was boiling in a heat wave, and during on race day, the spectators, myself, and all the drivers were accosted by a terrible amount of heat. I think the temperature was at least 95 and maybe higher. And the drivers were particularly upset because the heat was coming back from their engines. The cars were front engined at that time, and because a lot of guys were asking for relief.
He can't go on. The heat has begun.
One of the saddest parts of that race was the exhaustion from the heat of Carl Scarborough, who was a very nice guy. He sat down on the pit wall, absolutely worn out, went to the Indianapolis Speedway infield hospital, and not too later passed away.
In the evening, the dragsters come out. Hang 4 tires on a jet engine, and the sky may be the limit.
At one time, a noted drag racer came to Indianapolis with the idea of looking around and perhaps joining the crowd of the round and round race drivers. The veterans of Indianapolis looked at him soberly and with a straight face said, "All you have to do is come down the straightaway at your best speed, your fastest speed, and then turn left."
Only the throttle controls you as the car drifts out. Then, rocket down to the next turn and do it all over again.
Introducing the all-new Silverado Heavy Duty. The most powerful heavy-duty pickup you can get. Silverado Heavy Duty. More truck from Chevy.
Introducing new Armor All Protectant Wipes. Armor All Shine and Protection, now in a wipe. We take any truck bed, spray it, and you can do this. Line it. A new American motorcycle has earned its place.
Doesn't Dad deserve a Norelco razor? This Father's Day, give him a Norelco, not an imitation. The Norelco Quadra Action.
Roll camera, speed, Les Becker interview, take 3.
The first thing I would do when starting a new venture, a new film at a track, particular track, I would try to come up with some sort of a theme, some sort of an idea. One year I was influenced by what was going on in the world. The first attempt at America's launch of a space vehicle. So I named the show Men, Missiles, 500 Miles. And the theme was that if men had learned to control fire and to bend metal, it was only a question of time before he was able to reach the stars. And that was the theme. The film production process, the actual shooting, was very complex for a number of reasons. One, we had to have permission to get to the various places on the racetrack, to get to the assigned areas where we wanted to shoot. Second was elbowing for position on these limited size platforms, which we weren't allowed to build. We were I was just wandering around the pits looking for human interest. If the mechanics were scurrying around, I knew there was a pit stop coming up, and I would go for that. I would stay there. And one of my great technological innovations was the use of a little two-step ladder to elevate me over the tops of the mechanics and other hangers-on in the pits.
He covered the 100 miles in 43 1/2 minutes and earned himself $6,600 in lap prizes for leading all the way.
In the old days, back in the 50s and the 60s, this was the major camera that many of us used. It certainly was a handheld, easy-to-move camera that would get us around the pits. It was 3 separate lenses, and the viewfinders changing with the lenses. And it was powered by a spring. So you had to wind it up like you used to wind up an old alarm clock and release it this way. The camera would run for about 30 seconds at a time. One of the best things that happened to us was we got zoom lenses. This was the first time that a zoom was sharp enough and clear enough and extended enough to be useful to us. You'll notice that in past years from use, the camera has got shiny spots here and here, which is where it pressed against my forehead and against my cheekbone. So you can imagine how many times came from Kodak. 100 feet of film would run about 3 minutes, and then the camera had to be reloaded. It came to us in little boxes like this from Kodak, and then it was sent to the lab after being exposed. It was printed, and then we took the work print and put it up on 2 reels like this, with rewinds like this that are mounted on the table, and we could screen this way at fairly high speed, so the action was sort of fast. When we picked the frame that we wanted, we just pressed this little button, which put a nick on the film, and then I would take it to this splicer, which is just nothing more than a jig, press it on some pins here, and do the edit, do the actual cut and paste of the edit. When we're done with this, which we called a very rough cut, we would take the film over to the moviola, and here we would thread it through the moviola, and again, be able to move it at regular speed. This is standard speed. Stop it where we want, and open the gate, which allows me exactly to touch the film itself, which is unheard of in television, and then be able to eliminate the few frames that we didn't want. And this is the way it was for 50 or 60 years, both in the New York area and in Hollywood. Many of the best movies you've ever seen were made on simple equipment like this. Once the film was edited, I have script in mind. And sometimes I'd be scratching down lines of dialogue or lines of narration while I was doing the editing. Then I would take the film, now roughly edited, back to the top, back to the beginning, and sitting there with a moviola on one foot and a typewriter next to it, I would try to write script almost as fast as the film was being projected, as if I were a play-by-play narrator on a live TV show.
Bettenhausen has hauled up on Bryan, and entering the 4th turn, he stands on it and charges into first place. Here they come down the front straightaway. There's a new threat. Amick, a rookie, in yellow number 99, has taken 3rd.
Then that was the script that was cleaned, duplicated, and the narrator read. He saw the film first, but while he was reading, he didn't look at the film. He was concentrating on speaking. But then I would piece it out against the film, and that's how we finished it.
The track opens at dawn for spectators. Although the race won't start until 1 o'clock, the fans begin to arrive early in the morning.
Someone got the idea, I can't remember who, that we ought to see backstage at the auto races. And backstage means going to where the cars were actually built. And we The fame was this was the home and the garage of Richard and Lee Petty. We were given permission to go into the garage, and though the town was small and the technology around them was not very sophisticated, within the garage it was very sophisticated. They can build engines to micrometer measurements. And we saw them put together a chassis, and we saw them put together an engine. I believe at that time it was a Valiant, because they were running smaller cars on certain circuits. And we followed them as they went down a narrow country road, dirt, zipping along at 90 miles an hour, as if you and I were going in our driveway at 35. And it was a great experience with that car.
G-Tech Pro Performance Meter measures 0 to 60 times, quarter-mile times and speed, braking distance, handling Gs, and yes, horsepower. No installation, just plug it in and off you go. 1/10 of a second accuracy, achieved with a precision accelerometer and DSP technology. Magazine. Your childhood dream come true. Order your G-Tech Pro today and become the test car driver you always wanted to be. Have as much fun as you had when you drove for the first time. Guaranteed, or your money back. G-Tech Pro is only $139.95. Call our 24-hour hotline right now at 1-800-G-Tech-PRO. That's 1-800-483-2477.
This July on the Outdoor Life Network, for the first time ever in the U.S., live daily coverage of one of the world's premier sports events, the Tour de France. 20 stages, over 2,000 miles. Through the Alps, the Pyrenees, and a big finish on the Champs-Élysées. For 2 years straight, an American named Lance Armstrong has owned this race. Can Lance and the boys of the U.S. Postal Service deliver for a third time? The Tour de France, live exclusively on OLN.
All's quiet in South Carolina. The flags and battle songs of the Confederacy are fading memories. The August sun beats down on a hot and quiet land. The tobacco's gone to market. Now the cotton. But as August slides into September, the Carolina countryside stirs to old memories. Old times are gone, but not forgotten, as once again a great sound thrills the air. Dixie. But the distant sound of Dixie is mixed with a roar of engines. At Darlington, South Carolina, they've cleared a cotton field. And look out on Labor Day.
There was a very different atmosphere in NASCAR, and a very different atmosphere in the South as opposed to what was going on at places like Indianapolis. As Dynamic Films became involved with, was the Darlington Raceway in Darlington, South Carolina. It was one of the very first major racetracks for NASCAR to have built. The track was only 1 3/8 miles, which may sound strange, but that was all the property they had. One end of it is different than the other end of it. That is, the first turn is a different. The place is jammed. In the first race they ever held, they had people knocking down fences to get in there. Maybe 5,000 people got in without a ticket. They were tired of waiting in line. Nobody expected that sort of a turnout. And that made a lot of other people around the country say, hey, stock car racing is here to stay.
Through the years, stock car auto racing has made the American automobile safer, faster, and more dependable. Stock car racing had been America's greatest automotive proving ground. And in 1956, almost 70,000 racing fans gathered to see a show which has grown faster than any other in America.
A lot of people ask, why don't women seem to appear in these shows? And the answer is very simple. They weren't permitted. In this era, women were simply forbidden to be anywhere near the auto race cars. They always thought that they might be a distraction and somebody would forget to put a bolt on straight. Women were not allowed into the pits, and they certainly would be unable to drive if anybody was in a position to offer them a ride.
250,000 fans are on hand.
Now, as to why people love racing, it's probably the same competitive spirit that the color, the roar, the heart of a crowd cheering for the same or opponent or other opponents is all something that becomes part of the blood of the younger people who grew up to be mature race fans. And so it goes. I mean, thousands of people turn out for the marathon, both to run and to watch. And thousands of people have been entertained by the Olympics. So racing is human.
The drivers will navigate this treacherous course from 10 o'clock in the morning until 10 at night. For 1 week of the year, the quiet of Sebring and this abandoned military airfield just outside the town will be shattered. That week is about to begin.
Sebring, I remember, it was a 12-hour race on an abandoned airport. We did a song about it, I remember. So it was kind of interesting, and it set the stage.
On an old abandoned airfield, mighty craft of days gone by, stand a challenge to the future, on the land as in the sky. Time goes by, and as it passes, knowledge grows and standards rise, and the new in engineering must be proven, must be tried.
The songwriter was a man. One of the problems, of course, at Sebring is we had no elevation. There was no way to get a camera up high to cover a bigger area of the racetrack. So we made do with what we could do.
So on this abandoned airfield comes the final, toughest test. Here the finest come to battle, and the victories to the best.
The interesting part of the race is that because it was 12 hours, they had to run through the evening and into the night. And we got some spectacular shots during the sunset. But when it got really dark, all we saw was headlights coming and taillights going. And at that time, film was very slow. That is, you needed a lot of light for an exposure, and we were seeing almost nothing. So we edited very quick the last few laps. I remember very clearly, I was wearing a new pair of pants to that racetrack, a new work pants. And as I squatted down for my first shot at 10 o'clock in the morning, the pants split. And I was walking around with my underwear exposed for the rest of a 12-hour day.
Beautiful car.
200 horsepower, V6 engine. Got your name written all over it. You like it?
Done. I want this car. I will take this car.
You've got to take it for a test drive.
No, I'm going to take the car. I want it.
Let's put this thing on the road.
Let's go for a test drive. Test drive over. I want the car.
Chevy Impala.
I love this car.
We'll be there.
Some guys spend all weekend polishing their bike. I wash mine.
Going a full 12 rounds is all about stamina. That's why I like high endurance from Old Spice. No deodorant protects better. And it lasts longer because it evaporates more slowly. Want proof? If you're not convinced, Old Spice will buy you a stick of your old stuff. Let me put it this way. High endurance lasts longer than I do. I'm working on that.
The Lost Drive-In brings you so close to the action at Le Mans, you'll singe your eyebrows.
It can happen to you.
Steve McQueen in a film only he could handle. Don't miss the classic race film Le Mans this Saturday at 9 p.m. Eastern.
Winner in 1959. The third turn. This is going to be a race.
I go back so far to 1953, as I've mentioned earlier, that some of the men I've seen racing are now, quote, legends of the sport. I clearly remember Lee Petty as a race driver. I remember Richard Petty looking as a child sitting behind the wheel. And Wilbur Shaw I met one time. He was at that time president of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, or general manager, whatever they called him. He was their face to the public. Andy Granatelli was a very colorful fellow. Won the Indianapolis 500 with Mario Andretti at the wheel. And Mario Andretti was a perfect gentleman. He worked with us easily, did what we asked, made no fuss, never acted, how shall I say, uppity. Underpowered for Indianapolis. It was really a Grand Prix car. It sounded like a sewing machine, a Singer sewing machine. It does ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. Another colorful character was Junior Johnson. Junior was a stock car first racer, then mechanic. Built cars, maintained them. Very competitive. And was the subject of a book by Tom Wolfe, his article about the entire world of motorsports. One famous racer named A.J. Foyt, who won Indianapolis a number of times, started his career as a child with a go-kart. And when the family was away, or not looking, he tore up the front lawn, spinning around in his go-kart with the wheels churning up the grass and tearing it all up. His father looked at it, and happily to say he didn't whip the kid, but reseeded the lawn and took him to another place to race. I asked for one autograph from one driver in my entire racing career, and I passed out a Speed magazine, and I got A.J. Foyt's name on the front cover. Buck and Buddy Baker were a great pair. Buck was the father, Buddy was the son. The son was called the Gentle Giant. He was a guy about 6'6". Buck and Buddy would often go out on the town. Buddy would say at the end of the evening, and I heard this him actually say this, he said, "During the day he's my dad. In the evening he's my older brother." Fonty Flock and Tim Flock was another family affair. bring them to people's attention. Quite interesting guys and full of fun.
Dad, I missed the bus.
Really?
The 911 Carrera, what only a Porsche brings to driving.
Thanks, Dad. Dad.
Introducing new Armor All Protectant Wipes. Armor All Shine and Protection, now in a wipe.
Hey, Alex.
Hi, Michael.
After you.
Oh, no, after you.
No, I insist.
Thank you.
Competition. Most of the time, it brings out the best in us.
Magazine is on television.
Everything you need to know straight from the editors of America's original Speed Lovin' magazine. Hot Rod TV, Saturdays at 7:30 Eastern.
Then a car struck the wall ahead of him, and Bookie was in real trouble.
I've been in it so long that a lot of the drivers had their sons old enough to enter, and I saw both generations. I saw Bill Vukovich race. Many years later, I saw his son race. I know the Unser family. There were a number of Unsers who were racing. Some at Indianapolis with a major series of record wins. Jim Hurtubise was the first man to run a 150-mile-an-hour lap in qualifications for the Indianapolis 500. He was later seriously burned in a crash. And when he recovered, his hands were badly damaged, and the doctor told him, the plastic surgeon told him, that he could have his hands straight this way or can have his hands curled so they could drive a race car or drive a car. And Hurtubise chose this. Agajanian was, again, a passionate sportsman for the event. Always had a race car that tended to be, I'm almost sure, his own, rather than a corporation. Troy Ruttman, who won the event in 1952 and was, I think, 23 years old, the youngest driver ever to win the Indianapolis 500. On a pit stop, a group of 5 men who were brilliantly choreographed so that each did a specific job, and they would bring in the car, it would stop, they would jack it up, they would change 4 tires, they would load it with 20 gallons of fuel, and the car would not be standing still more than 18 or 19 seconds. It's absolutely hard to believe. We once did a slow-motion study, years later, of how this was accomplished, and we saw what each man did, and it was a ballet. The key to a good race driver is always the access to good equipment. And to get good equipment, you have to show that you're a good race driver in bad equipment. And that was often the key to the whole career of a young man trying to make his living as a race driver. There's Smokey Unick. Smokey would do miracles in mechanical work. He had a shop, a big shop at Daytona that I visited once. Very soft-spoken, very quiet, but very competitive. And wouldn't quit, wouldn't let his driver quit even when the car was crashed or badly bashed in. He'd build it again, put it together again, make it run.
Unick makes his decision. He'll make it run again.
does a day's work.
Want more from a sport utility? Test drive the all-wheel drive Subaru Outback. More ground clearance than a Ford Explorer Sport. More cargo space than a Jeep Cherokee. More miles per gallon than any leading midsize SUV. Add a smooth car-like ride and you have a sport utility with a whole lot more. Outback, the world's first sport utility wagon. Get financing as low as 2.9% APR on all 2001 models.
Finally, a tire treatment that lasts weeks, not days, even after heavy rains. Introducing Meguiar's Endurance, the long-lasting tire gel that even stops tires from turning brown. Apply the rich concentrated gel easily and evenly with a special applicator. For weeks, not days. Meguiar's Endurance, the tough, long-lasting tire treatment.
After the first few days of basic training, you realize your preconceptions were all wrong. You're ready to make the transition from civilian to soldier. You've seen your drill sergeants. They aren't so bad. Then you realize your training hasn't even started yet.
You better move. You better pick up the pace.
Log on. Watch Basic begin.
Waiting on you.
Only at GoArmy.com.
Some networks will put a camera inside a car, next to a car, but the Speed Vision GT and Touring Car Championships is taking it to the next level. We're putting cameras everywhere. Tires, carbs, gear shift, gas tank, helmet, trunk, everything. Then we're dropping in some of the greatest road racers of all time, like Derek Bell. Wire him up and let him tell you how the race is going. The Speed Vision GT and Touring Car Championships, right from the driver's seat.
We can try and keep off those curves as much as we can.
This time, you ride shotgun.
This is the deadline moment for hopes and aspirations, for mechanics' wizardry and driver's skill, for razor-sharp judgments and lightning time. 25-mile speeds on the straightaway.
Dynamic Films, Nat Zucker and I covered a number of dirt track auto races. The dirt track races were either half mile or in some cases a mile. And the interesting thing about them is that they were dirt and therefore used for both auto racing and horse racing.
Here we are at the New York State Fairgrounds in Syracuse, New York, the morning after 2 days of hard, soaking rain. This 1 mile track is muddy deep down. Now trucks and tractors are going round and round in an effort to get the track dry enough for today's 100-mile 3A championship automobile race. Look at that mud. It's important to make the track as smooth as possible because ruts can be extremely dangerous. Imagine hitting a rough spot at 125 miles an hour.
And we covered one. I was on the outside of a turn, and I was covered with the dirt that was sprayed up by the moving cars. And the front was dirty, the back was clear. And so it went.
Part of a great American industry behind the racing champions.
These films were sponsored by a group of industrial companies. Mobil Oil was one. Pure Oil at that time was one. Firestone, Monroe Shock Absorbers, various combinations of these. Each got their own main titles and end titles to make it look like a specifically for the Perfect Circle Piston Ring Company. And at that time, they may have been basic Indianapolis films, or they may have been Indianapolis plus Daytona films into one package. First, they were used by the Speedway itself. The Speedway was a sponsor, so to speak, of these films because they showed it around in order to get more folks to come buy tickets for more seats at the next event. The second use was to show the film to Kiwanis clubs, to Rotary clubs, to boys groups. The third use would be on television, and the sponsor's local representative would put under his arm a copy of the film and take it to the local television station, and they would run it, usually a week or two before the next annual event. These were the various audiences that I knew about, and there probably were a bunch more.
That's right, Frank.
You're the president of NASCAR and also the director of this race, I believe.
That's right.
I wonder, Bill, if you could tell us something about what goes on behind the scenes here.
Sure. Here's Howard Vogel, Champion Spark Plug. He's their chief engineer.
Bill France convinced the auto executives by using this film that they should participate in auto racing. The next year, there was a forest of tripods and cameras brought there by the auto companies in order to photograph something for their own use internally. Of course, they were huge. Total camera cost was $300 or $400, and I was making the shots, and they were sitting where they were sitting, getting sand in their gears.
All the hours you've spent boring out cylinders, building strokers, and setting up suspension, you'd have graduated from MMI by now, and you'd be getting paid for doing what you love. Call 1-800-994-3664 to find out how you can become one of the best technicians in the world. Motorcycle Mechanics Institute.
Property owners, if weeds and brush are taking over your property, at last there is a solution. The amazing DR Field and Brush Mower can reclaim overgrown land with less work than you ever dreamed possible. The secret is that the DR works like a big tractor-mounted brush mower, but in a walk-behind version that's easier to handle and a lot less expensive. So if parts of your land are too overgrown for any ordinary mower, call toll-free for free details about the amazing new DR Field and Brush Mower.
It happens here and only here. You get every race, every moment live. Speed Vision, the Formula One season. And June 8th, the big boys continue the fight.
The world's most famous beach. The world's fastest speedway. Let's go now to Daytona Beach, Florida, the city by the sea, where high-speed testing first began. More than 50 years ago, these smooth, hard sands proved to be a surface upon which man could challenge speed.
Probably the most interesting other place I've been was the sands of Daytona. Here was a 2-mile stretch of sand. They had to time the race, the start of the race, for low tide. And they used the area that had been flattened out by the waters, coming in and going out again, as a almost concrete-like surface. It was a 4-mile track. There were 2 hairpin turns. The sand was one part of the long strip, and the backstretch was highway. And that was a 4-mile racetrack. Other nice thing about being on the sand at Daytona were the pretty girls. That was always a pleasure to watch.
Here come the only performers at Daytona Beach, faster than the stock car. Salute. The Air Force crashes the sound barrier. as racing stock cars prepare once more to smash records on the sands of Daytona.
Somewhere in the mid-50s, we made a Daytona film called Sand Barrier, which was a takeoff on the then important sound barrier that airplanes were breaking through. And we worked on the beach at Daytona, long before there was a Daytona Speedway, and watched the cars early in the morning and late at night, depending upon the tides. And during the event, I was able to cover two sides of the racetrack by running across a narrow strip of grass and palmetto leaves from the straightaway on the sands to the straightaway on the road behind me. Along this straightaway at one time, I covered it from an airplane. And as I was going along over the surf at about 75 feet, the airplane couldn't keep up.
This is the day they've all been waiting for, race day. Ushered in by anxious fans, baton twirlers, bands, and a jet age salute. But now, there is a new track. The beach is too slow for today's cars. High-powered stock cars stand ready to race. Highly talented mechanics have done all in their power to make them ready for this supreme 500-mile test.
The Daytona racetrack was the first of the high bank speedways. They didn't call it a raceway, they called it a speedway. And the high bank turns, which I've described as being almost like a wall, allowed the cars to go very fast around a 2.5-mile circuit. It was also a big crowd, which grew bigger year by year. And of course, these cars were stock cars, NASCAR stock cars. I once had an opportunity to drive a rental car on the Daytona Speedway. And it was a convertible. And I was going down the straightaway at about 75 or 80 miles an hour, feeling very proud of myself, feeling in control on this giant 2.5-mile racetrack, when I got into the curve, into the first turn. And this is pitched 30 feet. A little bit, so you sort of inch up it. It was like driving into a wall. All you saw ahead of you was wall. And the incline was so great that the car tends to push off the banks onto the flat apron below the major part of the racetrack. And being in a convertible, I was sure I was either going to fall out or the whole car was going to tip over. It was a frightening feeling, and I can tell you right now, I can still remember the sweat pouring off my brow as I finally reached the backstretch, got on the straightaway again, and slowed down and stayed on the apron. I only took one turn at the Daytona Speedway.
G-Tech Pro performance meter measures 0 to 60 times, quarter-mile times and speed, braking distance, handling G's, and yes, horsepower. No installation, just plug it in and off you go. 1/10 of a second accuracy, achieved with a precision accelerometer and DSP technology. Magazines have tested it. Now they test with it. Find out results before
at Grand Am. This is the event, and this is Pontiac Memorial Day bonus cash. Added to existing offers, you can get at least $2,000 total cash back. Now, just imagine the thrills of driving a new Grand Am. It's fun, it's exciting. Or get really low 0.9 APR financing instead. It's your choice. See dealer for residency and other restrictions. This is where you get it, only until May 31st. Well, there you go.
One of the more interesting problems that a cameraman faces is the capture of a fast-moving, almost instantaneous, explosive crash. It seems when a car gets into a spin, it seems to my eye that the car seems to go faster than when it's going straight ahead. Their adhesion to the track is always problematical. They're just barely sticking there. The tires have very little tread on them, and once the car gets out of control, it skids along like a puck on an ice rink. And when it hits, it really seems to go up in pieces. Lots of pieces flying, lots of places. When a race driver is seriously injured, that piece of information is not made known to the crowd because it puts a damper on the crowd. So death and injury are not mentioned on the public address system. It's always he is rushed to the hospital or he may be helicoptered to another location in town. One of the more notable crashes was one that happened back in 1952 at Langhorne, Pennsylvania on a dirt track. A friend of mine, Kit Davidson, who is even older than I, and I still talk to him occasionally, into each other. These were modified cars, so there wasn't a major loss of capital investment, but it was still quite a spectacular sight.
Or not, in all that pile of wreckage, there was just one injury, a broken leg.
But the cars have been built for safety, even though they look terrible when they crash. You'd be surprised how few people are seriously injured. All the cars have roll cages now. The Indianapolis cars have what they call monocoque construction, which means the driver is sitting in a basket almost the way an egg is sitting in its carton. And he's strapped in with airplane-type seatbelts, fighter plane-type seatbelts, and he is not going to move. Occasionally an arm or a leg gets broken, but seldom anything serious.
Sure glad to have you home. Hello, baby. Ooh, you been gone too long. Come right in and tell me how you've been. I sure missed you since you've been gone.
More best friends depend on Chevy.
You're sure looking swell.
We'll be there.
Introducing new Armor All Protectant Wipes. Armor All Shine and Protection, now in a wipe.
Gear up for Gear Guide, only on OLN. If you're going to hit the road, head down a mountain, or up a stream, put on the brakes till you see Gear Guide rate the top equipment out there. Sunday, 6:30 p.m. And don't miss Gear Guide Cycling Special, April 19th on OLN.
Does the car make the man, or does the man make the car? Come on, the car really makes the man, don't you think? The Speed Vision GT and Touring Car Championships. And get all the bumper-to-bumper action next Friday at 8 Eastern.
Be there.
Sit behind the wheel of a racing car, setting new records of speed at famous international speedways. Share the thrills, excitement, and danger as men of iron gambled their lives on split-second decisions. These are the great moments of sport. Is written on Speedway International.
Dynamic was making a series of films, and these were mostly some previously made Indianapolis and Daytona films. We needed one more. We had 12 completed shows. So I volunteered to make one strictly out of outtakes, leftover pieces that never made the original shows. And I tried to say that a race day anywhere, a day of racing, it looks pretty much the same. The empty stands, cleaning up the racetrack, then the cars arrive, then they practice, and then they race. And I did it in sort of free-form poetry, and it seemed to work, and won a couple of prizes. In 1961, after making probably 100 auto racing films, I felt that I had done what I had to do. And I had other private plans, such as being a writer. So I left Dynamic. I did that last show as a freelance editor to help in the transition to other editors. And I went off to my own office to act as a writer for a while. I also did some production under my own name, Custom Video, or at that time, Custom Films. As for my own career path, I stumbled into it. I'm fond of the old saying, is life is what happens to you while you're making other plans. And once into it, I seem to excel at it. And when excelling and doing a good job, you tend to like it and tend to go on the same career path as you've been on for a while. I've thought many times that maybe I ought to be doing something else, but suddenly I look back, or I look at my watch, and I'm suddenly 70 years old, and there's not much likelihood that I'm going to change my style of work.
Just how they beat like a pack of hands. Flaherty fought off all challenges as he led from the fifth. Looks like a race right down to the checkered flag.
Jim Hurtubise, known as Hercules. And if the Are You Ready was on the pole for the second. Just look at that man drive. Roger Ward, winner in 1959.